I'll just announce up front that I have not received any notices of conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest relating to the open session of the board meeting. Would anyone like to, at this time, raise a possible conflict of interest? Okay, not hearing any, we'll move on to calling the meeting to order. And we'll start with the approval of the agenda. I'll move that the board approve the November 18th, 2025 open session agenda as circulated. Seconded by Jake. All in favor? Motion carries. And then approving the minutes, I move that the board approve the October 21, 2025 open session meeting minutes as circulated. Seconder, Ron? All in favor? All right, motion carries. Wonderful. Thank you. I thought it would take a little bit longer to do the preliminaries, but here they are done. And so we can, however, move ahead to the external reports and presentations. And the first item is the Campus and Community Planning Monthly Report. And I'll just note, Carol gave us notice that she is traveling and is unable to attend tonight's meeting. But if you have any questions relating to the Campus and Community Planning Report, I can convey those questions to her. So the report is relatively short this month, and it's available. Are there any questions? Yes, Ron?
Okay, it's not to do with this report, but we've not heard from Jen McCutcheon for a long time. So we have no information of what's going on in Metro Vancouver and how it impacts us out here at UBC and UNA. I'm just wondering, have you been in contact with her? Has she given us any communication?
Yeah, she went quiet for a while, I'll say. Recently, she has put out another newsletter, so she is kind of back. I believe that the family had a move, and so that might have been related. But at the moment, I'm not sure when we'll next expect her at a meeting, but I can, if the board is interested, I can reach out to her and ask her either to send us an update from her work, or if we'd like to request her attendance at a future meeting, we could do that. She may have a family conflict on Tuesdays. So if that's the case, then we may have to make do with a communication on paper, but yep.
Okay, I have one point I'd like to raise with her, and it's in behind the Pemberley and Balmoral. There's an awful lot of fuel in the woods, okay, and you know, it's not being dealt with, and it could end up being a fire hazard, particularly the Pemberley as well, a wood-clad building.
Okay, yeah, I think we have raised that with her before, but I'll make sure to send along your concern about that, and see if she has any updates on the forest management in Pacific Spirit Park. Yeah, Jake.
I don't know, maybe Wegland can answer this one. It relates to what Ron is talking about. There's a fence that runs behind, I'm talking now specifically Balmoral, but it runs behind, the other condos that are there. Is that the property line, or does the property extend past that at all?
I recall there's a fence line that's separate between the private property and the Pacific Spirit Park. And that fence line is approximately the property line that we are looking at.
Thanks. That's what I thought. But thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Ron.
When we were looking at the stone fencing around Hampton Place a number of years ago, we discovered that the fence is all over the place. That's why we have these separate agreements with Thames Court, West Hampstead, and Sandringham, because the fence was actually across their land, and that whereas UBC is undertaken to maintain that property. So it'd be interesting to see if we get a survey in behind the three stratas into the park to see exactly where that fence sits. I think it would be worthwhile, and I think we can arrange that, Waylon.
Yeah, Ron, thank you for your information. We can take a look into those information and then follow up with the board. And just to clarify, in terms of the time, you're referring to the confidence area, am I correct?
Okay,
I'm referring to the area along West 16th. Okay.
so I guess we can consider this external reports and presentations, the non-existent report on electorate from the electorate. Are there any other issues for that or for the campus and community planning report? Okay. All right, then we move on to the management report and we'll start with Paul.
Thank you very much. The report this month is, I think, fairly standard. The only thing I would highlight out of it really is the focus this month has really been on development of the 26-27 draft budget. So that's really where a lot of my time and focus has been. If there are any questions related to any of the other items and the more kind of standard contacts that I have into the committee and on behalf of the board and the organization, I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Okay, are there any questions for Paul on the CAO report for the month? Okay, then moving on to communications and Glenda.
Thank you, Chair. The one thing that I'd like to highlight in my report is briefly just highlighting the social media report in your package. The second quarter of the fiscal year reflects the first full 3 months under the new social media strategy that we implemented this year with our new part-time social media specialist. The focus of the strategy is to build trust and engagement with residents through professional, consistent, and community-focused content that supports the UNA strategic priorities. As you can see, Instagram continues to be our strongest channel, which is about 93% of our organic views come from there. So our efforts have been concentrated on maximizing that platform. We've included some metrics here that show some really significant growth in this quarter from the previous quarter, including increases in views up to 183% and increases in reach up to 1,967%, as well as others. Visits to our profile have increased nearly fivefold. Followers increased by 29%. Interactions have more than tripled, and click links, which reflect direct action, grew by more than 30,000% over the previous quarter. So these results reflect both improved content strategy and benefits of having a dedicated in-house expertise. And we're still in an audience building phase, but the early indicators show that the UNA social media presence is reaching more residents, driving more engagement, and it's helping to strengthen our connection with the community. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Just about the increase in social media engagements, would you say that that's primarily due to the increase in quantity of postings, or are there other factors that might have contributed to these increases?
Yes, it's a couple of things. One is we've started utilizing more paid ads, because now that we've got a dedicated social media person, they can really fine tune those settings of like what the scope should be, what the target audience should be, how much should we be spending so that we're maximizing those ad dollars. Also, yeah, it's also that building of quality materials, making sure that it's scheduled, making sure it's predictable, making sure that it's consistent and timely. And we're also increasing our engagement as well, making sure that we're responding to those comments. So all of these things add up to, exponentially the growth of social media. And yeah, it's really an exciting time for us. We're really excited about it because we do think that there's a huge gap that this potentially could reach. We know we're still we constantly struggle with trying to reach the university audience, and I think that this is definitely the way to do it. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Glenda. Other question? Yes, Sandy.
Okay, thank you. My question is on page 14. Key highlights. There is a created ads for the campus resident. I would like to know what that means, which means you promote campus resident or you receive ads for the campus resident and to create the revenue. Thank you.
Are you asking about the created ads for the campus resident? So essentially, the UNA advertises our services on the campus resident. So we create the ads so that we can post them on the paper. So one example, the typical ones that we advertise every season is our programs. So whenever there are new programs, we'll create an ad that specifically says like registration opens soon. Make sure that you're tuned into our social media or you're tuned into our newsletter so that you know when registration begins. Another one that we constantly promote is the UNA card, which gives folks access to discounts and also free access to facilities all over the campus.
Yeah, further question is about do we create any revenue from the ads on the campus resident?
Yes, we do. We don't pay. The UNA doesn't pay for our ads. We comp ourselves, but the paper does make some revenue. I think just off the top of my head, I don't quote me on this. I think the last a couple of months ago they made something around like $2,000. So they're bringing in some revenue with that. I mean, obviously it's not yet maximized, but there are also limits in its terms of reference of how many percentage of the page surface area can be dedicated to ads.
We have the number of the revenue from the ads. Thank you.
We can return with that information with you in a future report. Yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions for Glenda about the communications report? Okay, well, thank you, Glenda. Moving on to the recreation report, and Dave.
Yep, good evening to the board. The recreation report, highlight report is in front of you in the package. Just a couple of things to address in the sense of, so we had some great success in the month of, continued success in the month of October with our events. Diwali drew over 1,000 local residents. And not surprising with the amount of rain that we had, Halloween also drew over 1,000 people into the building that evening. Again, we're seeing the success with our volunteers as it continues to grow our resources within them. Again, one of our challenges that we're still faced is just groups that are still coming to us wanting to have access to free space and the ability for our programs to fit them in is one of the challenges we're still facing on a daily basis. But if there's any questions, I'm here to answer them.
All right, are there questions on the recreation report? Sandy.
Yes, on page 15, on the customer service and the facilities, do we have the number on the community feedback, which means any complaints, suggestions? I remember that before in the report, we have this category on the community feedback. Thank you.
Yep, great question. We've moved the overall metrics of the community feedback to the seasonal reports that we provide. But I can tell you that we had 0 in our community box for written reports that have come in. We seem to be at a standpoint of 0 or 1. Somebody keeps leaving nice notes for me, but I don't know who that is. Could be, yeah. Me.
Did you take action on those?
No, they're just, yeah. They comment on what I'm wearing.
Huh, that doesn't sound entirely appropriate, but we'll just leave it at that. That's great. Thanks, Dave. And of course, in those seasonal reports, you'll also have the summary of the online the online submissions of concerns, questions, and the like, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Evan?
Can you briefly describe what is a close swapping program? It's the first time I see this.
The closed swap meet was put on by both our Connected Communities Coordinator as well as our seniors and youth coordinators. And it was an opportunity for individuals to bring secondhand clothing, any items that they wanted to trade off. And they met with others. It was very informal, but it was a way to sort of show a little bit of sustainability with clothing, and you could trade other people items that you had so that they could take home new items that they would desire.
That's really neat to hear about. I know from my own kids that kind of vintage/used clothing hunting is really big these days, and what a great thing for teenagers to do with themselves, you know. So it's great that we're getting in on that. Okay, any other questions on the recreation report? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the operations and sustainability report, Wegland.
Thank you, Igor. So the report is before everyone. Happy to answer any questions. And in terms of the report, there are 2 quick updates that I would like to just flag. We have successfully completed the yard sale events, and we have a great turnout. And on top of it, we have also completed the first hybrid emergency preparedness meeting that is working with UBC. We have 19 in-person attendees as well as 32 virtual. So given the result, we are intended to continue this type of hybrid setup to improve attendance. And other than that, happy to answer any questions.
Jake?
Just one on the Hampton Place paving. We probably have covered this before, but who paid for that? Where did that money come from?
So are you referring to the roundabout work? Yes, the roundabout work is covered by the UNA operations expenditures.
How much was that?
Roughly, if I recall correctly, around 75 to 80 for the roundabout.
Okay, can you give us an update on the boiler installation here in the community center?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ron, for checking in on that and also for recommending a better solution. So we were able to find a better solutions with the boiler, with the approved funding, and the installation has been completed.
So what kind of a warranty do you have?
It is still the manufacturer warranty that we have. I believe, if I recall correctly, 5 years warranty for the boilers.
I have another question. In the neighbors agreement, one of the commitments that we made with UBC is a tree risk protocol, which I believe has to be done before any other work is done via the guidelines or anything. Has that negotiation been started with UBC? And if it has, where are we at?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
In the neighbors agreement, both UBC and UNA agreed to prepare a tree risk protocol. And so far, we haven't seen anything on it because it would have to come to us here for approval, and I'd have to go to UBC. accordingly. Has any work been done on it?
So I believe for the tree risk protocol is related to the UNA tree management operations guideline and the tree risk matrices that we developed in the guideline. So just want to update the board is that the guideline has been finished as of October 30th, and then the tree risk you refer from the neighbors agreement will be largely aligned with the one that is we provided in the tree management operations guideline.
So when will it be brought for council to review and approve, and then we can send it over to UBC?
I think maybe I'll just double check with Paul on that one.
Given that it's just been completed and received in October, we should be able to bring it forward to the board in the December cycle.
And is it for the board's information?
It would be primarily for the board's information. It's an operational level discussion, so it's not expected that the board would be providing input in. The work is complete, but we can certainly bring it forward for information.
Jake?
Yeah, back to the paving. Should that not have been a responsibility of UBC?
Thank you, Jake. So for that work, we previously in summertime, we had a meeting with both UBC Municipal Services and UBC representative to discuss the road repair work and to determine whether the work is will be funded by the UNA or through the reserve that we previously discussed. So with the Hampton Place repair work, at the end during the meeting and with UBC, the decision is the work will be funded by the operations. And the staff, as during the discussion, has tried to push forward for using the reserve, but as discussed in the email that we go over earlier, which the reserve did not calculate the smaller scale project in terms of the road repair. So hence, at that moment, the decision for the repair will be funded by the UNA Operations Fund, while for the reserve will be funded the future Iona Drive replacement project.
Yeah, I categorically disagree with that being taken from UNA reserves. I think that should be, I've read and read and read through that, neighbors agreement. And it talks about, the responsibility for the roads to be UBC's, not UNA's. I mean, who decided that it should come from UNA?
It was I think, a joint decision based on the discussions we were having with the two major projects that we brought forward. One being Hampton with the repaving in combination with the concrete replacement. Excuse me, and the other being the work in Chancellor neighborhood. I would say from a staff perspective, we don't disagree with you in terms of the plain reading of the neighbors agreement. The response from UBC was a hesitancy around the use of its infrastructure funding for the Hampton project in particular because of its scale or scope, and perhaps some questions around priority. Internally, we made the decision to move forward by splitting those two projects in Hampton apart, the concrete work away from the paving, and undertook the paving not with reserve monies, but in our own operational budget. We had space in the budget, so we proceeded with our work to get it done. While we continue with this bigger conversation, and there's been, of course, a lot of emails back and forth this last little while about that. I think there's different perspectives about understanding a longer term approach, which I can't disagree with in terms of the sensibility around that on behalf of UBC. but also we also need to move forward with projects in a timely way. And so for this particular project, we elected to do that with available operational funds. I think there's more discussion to go on, and as the chair has mentioned in the email conversation, I think this is a topic for the board to have some internal discussions about, and set a bit of a direction that might help will help staff, help me in the conversations with UBC as we go forward. And we have targeted that for the December board meeting.
Yes, Jake.
Yeah, I don't disagree with going forward with the project, absolutely. But we do have to, I don't know what the format should be or when or whatever, but we have to have this conversation because it's clear when you read through that neighbors agreement over and over and over and over and over again, that it should be UBC responsibility. It doesn't talk about, well, the scope is this big or the scope is this big. This is the repair responsibility. And I just read the particular clause is the responsibility of UBC, not UNA. So we have to have this discussion, structured properly and everything else, but I don't disagree that we needed to do it. So that's good.
And I know we will have a more in-depth discussion at our next meeting. And, there can be a report prepared for discussion purposes and whatnot, and we can all review the neighbors agreement with considerable care. But I would like to clarify, just Jake, when you say it should be the responsibility of UBC, do you mean managing the work, or do you mean the funding coming from the neighbors fund? Right. Yeah, because that's makes sense. Yeah. So that there might be cases where the UNA would manage the work, but the funding would be withdrawn from the neighbors fund reserve, infrastructure reserve. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that clarification. I think Dave wants to speak.
I know, just maybe to comment on behalf of the university. And Jake, I also don't disagree with your comments. I too have read the neighbors agreement, and maybe I'll just leave it at that for that part. But we do have an upcoming finance committee meeting where we've invited, and you folks have agreed to invite some of my colleagues to comment on some of these things. And I wonder if that would be a good venue as well to raise this particular thing. Paul, others, in Carol's absence here, I don't know if you have perspective on that, if that's a good spot to have that ongoing conversation about this particular piece of infrastructure.
Yeah, and thanks, Dave, for raising that. That was part of the discussion at the last Finance and Audit Committee meeting, and we had planned for that for December. In some discussions, like very recently with the chair of Finance and Audit today, we're going to put that off, and we've put some messages back to campus and community planning to a later date. I think it's probably more important at this point for the board to have a bit of an internal discussion about this topic, and then we'll arrange for that. And it needs to happen regardless. It's just the timing of it. And as always, staff at campus and community planning are very supportive of coming, and we'll make that arrangements in due course.
Ron?
Okay, I have two comments on this. If this occurs in the future, I would like management to advise us earlier on it. There is an arbitration process, which we're going to have to explore at this next meeting, because we just simply can't, whether it's UNA or UBC signs the agreement, you have to honor the agreement. You can't turn around and vary the agreement, okay? I mean, we're not the mafia. So, and therefore, I've reached out to a previous counselor on this and says, was negotiating this agreement. So it's very specific. It's very plain and clear. Repaving doesn't say any dollar amount is UBC. And some people in good faith signed that agreement on behalf of UBC. And I think the people who signed that agreement on behalf of UBC would not be very happy if somebody else at UBC abrogated their good faith.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Are there any other comments or questions relating to the operations and sustainability report? Okay. Oh, yes, Mike.
I just also want to go on the record as stating that that this is $80,000 that according to our bylaws and the neighbors agreement should not have come out of our operational budget. And there seems to be a process by which we could request for reimbursement for that. And I think that we do need to be clear that, we are in charge of maintenance and cleaning. That includes gutters, but any paving or road works are very clearly defined as UBC territory within the neighbors agreement. And that's not a small amount of money. And given some of the feedback that we've had at our annual general meeting in regards to our finances, I think that it behooves us to make sure that we're spending the money that is in our funds appropriately and not paying for things that are not the responsibility of the UNA.
So yes, thank you for that, Michael. And just to be clear for the public in attendance here today, I'm not sure how many are, the infrastructure replacement reserve in the Neighbors Fund, that fund, that money comes from the neighbors levy, right? So that is as does the UNA's budget. So it's money that's stored in different places. So not to disagree with what anyone has said here, but when we talk about the responsibility of UBC, I think to reiterate what we're talking about is the funding coming from the Neighbors Fund reserve that is specified for that purpose. And that can be part of our further conversations on this matter when we meet next month about it, and we may well consider making a post facto request. I'm not sure if that's possible, but we could consider making a request that already expended funds for infrastructure repair be billed to the Neighbors Fund, and that there's a formal process for requesting that, and it's our prerogative to ask for that, I think. So point well taken. Are there any other points or questions on this? Okay, great. Thanks so much. Moving on to the finance report, and Athena is coming to us online. And so Athena, if all is going well, you're up.
Love your background.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, my report is before you. I think one specific area I just want to mention is the Director's Dashboard, which will be released in the first week of December. If your banking information is different than the provided information when you sign up as a director, please let me know immediately because I will need to make the update accordingly. So other than that, my report is before you. Feel free to ask me any question.
All right. Are there any questions on the management report from Athena? Okay. Thanks, Athena. I'm sure we'll be talking to you again shortly. So we'll now move on to the Neighbors Fund financial statement report. Oh, actually, Athena, that's you again. So if you would like to introduce that report.
Yes, the Neighbors Fund report is also before you. That is provided by the UBC. I believe there are some questions already being exchanged prior to the meeting, and I'm happy to address that. But before that, I just want to know if there's any other question on the floor before I answer those questions. That doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, so maybe we can let Athena, you move ahead and address the questions that were circulated in advance, and just remind the listeners what question you're answering, because not everyone may have been privy to those, and then we can take further questions after that. Ron wishes in the meantime.
I think in the interest, Athena, because I'm the one who composed most of those questions, that if possible, if you could put them down, your responses down in writing and circulate them to the board members so they get a better understanding. Because I don't think everybody has a copy of the financial statements in front of them to refer to. I think you can certainly can answer some verbally, but I think it's be more relative if we got them in written form.
Okay, yes.
I just want to address that, because from a process perspective, we have started to move into this a bit of a process with this current board about questions coming forward in writing before the various meetings, which we absolutely appreciate, having those questions in advance. However, we haven't historically, and it's not typical in this kind of situation, for written responses to all those questions being provided to the full board, other than at the board table. And that's part of the transparency with the general public and with the residents of the organization, that those questions are answered in a public forum in an open way, and they can be responded to that way. So we don't typically put together kind of formalized written responses to questions that are inputted, but this is the forum for those things to happen. So I would encourage the board not to shift off of that approach, because I think that does start to shift some of the kind of internal board governance and transparency a little bit further than it should.
Yeah, I would just add that, Athena, you can speak to the questions that were pre-circulated, and if the board wishes to ask for a follow-up of some kind, I think the board can do so, and that would be a formal request for some kind of follow-up. And so I'll leave it to board members after our discussion, if they wish to make any, they can do so, in keeping with Paul's suggestion there.
Okay. Okay, without further delay, I'm gonna go to the question that has been raised. So the order of the question is like, I will try to address question number 2 and onward, and then circle back to question number 1 at the very end. And the question number 2 basically is related to page 30, the service levy and then the GMSL. The total, adding the two numbers together, is $9.9 million. And in one of my previous report circulated, the number is shown as 9.7. So my answer to the question, and also confirm that with UBC, both number is actually correct. Why there is a differences is because there is a timing differences. The statement is prepared at the end of March, the fiscal year cutoff, and then that is cut off from April to March. But because we are the levy is being collected in the month of July, so their year is actually a little bit different. So, but when the UNA is I would say calculating the number is based on the year cut off in July. So there's always a timing difference in between. So the number will always be there will be a variance for that. So the official answer for that is like that, yes, there's a reconciliation is being done, and then the variance is caused by the timing differences. And UBC also confirmed that the same. So so that is the question, the answer for that. And then the second one, question number 3, is also referring to page 30th. There seems to be a withdrawal of 14,500. And then that number for the previous year is a number seems to be a revenue stream to the UNA, not to the UN, to the fund. But this year seems to be a minus dollar. So as I said, the statement is based on accrual basis of accounting. So when they are doing the book last year, there is an adjustment. So it means that the actual number comes back is actually is different. So this year they have to do an adjustment to account for the difference. So that's why it comes with a negative. So that number again, because it's based on accrual basis of accounting. So the number when the year is being closed is based on estimation. So that number will always fluctuate it up and down. So it depends. I think answer is also confirmed by UBC. Okay, I forget to say one thing, Dave. If you have any things to add, just for as a UBC rep, you feel free to jump in because I'm speaking on behalf of the UBC statement. But I did work with Ivy and then
Great
and
job,
Camilla
Tina.
and Camilla for that. So just to let you know.
And I have nothing to add at this time.
And then question number 4, in the expenses also section is also page 30th, the utility, the stormwater steward, the stormwater, that number is actually a very tricky number. So the number reported here is 660.1515. That actually is the correct number and the actual number from UBC utility. And the variance of why UNA have a 675 versus to that, and the reason is like because when UNA closes the book, the storm water is based on the estimation, because by the time the books is being closed, the number is actually not come to reality yet, because UBC utility always will have the number much later. And then don't forget the final quarter of the installment is as UNA bill to UBC at the month of January. So for that, because of all this timing variance, UBC is reporting an actual number, but the UNA is reporting on an estimated number. The estimated number is actual indeed to UNA, because that is really the number UNA based on to bill UBC for the neighbors levy. So so there's twofold to this question. Yes, the 661 is an actual number, and that's actually the storm water being charges from UBC utility. That is the reality number based on the fund. But to the UNA reality, the 675 also a reality number, because that's the number that we bill UBC for at the time we closed. Okay, so am I absolutely confusing everybody now, or I can continue?
Please go ahead. If there are
Okay.
questions, people can raise hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The last, not the second last question, I would say, is in regards to, sorry, I just lost my page. Just one sec. Okay. There's no analysis supporting the professional fee, and then the communication and so on, and then the total cost is $89,000, and then in the agreement, the administration is 87. So that also the difference is from year-end accounting fee accrual. So that number, I don't have the details breakdown of each category of the analysis. That is something maybe in the future we can work with UBC. But the variance is basically caused by the accounting is the accrual at the year end, as I said. So again, I think majority of those questions are legit, but most of them, actually, I would say all of them, all have timing issue impacting them. Circle back to oh, sorry.
Sorry, there is one question, I believe, on the last item, Ron.
Athena,
Yes.
taking these expenses, administration, professional fees, communication, we signed a neighbors agreement December 2024, before the fiscal year end of March 31st. What should have been happening, and this is why, we don't have an audit review here with the auditors, that those numbers should never been charged to us, just charged us the 87,000 that we agreed to. Obviously, the previous board negotiated, rather than have all these different expenses, let's just give you a slap number of 87. So that is not a timing difference. that is a functional error in the accounts. And needs to go back and have them corrected. I still have a problem with the utilities number. If it was actually 675 and they deducted what's 661, where's the $14,000? That itself is not, basically you tell me that the final billing that is based on is in January, and we put the budget together based on the assessment. Something's not kosher here.
The money, yes, I can explain, because the money actually is left in the fund. So instead of the UNA actually get that extra amount as an operation fund, the money can go upward or the other direction. Means that, like, okay, this year because there is 675, and then but some year it can be, we are only estimating maybe 620, and indeed the cost is 661. And the fund never charged the UNA back. So there's always one of those variants happening one way or the other. Yes, I think we can definitely, I agree with you, or where the money goes. So the money actually remains in the fund. So it's not, by that way, UBC takes away the money still stays in the fund. And not, yeah.
Number one, we should have those administrative expenses reduced down to 87. The second point is the money does not go into any of the directed reserves, like the infrastructure capital or the contingency or the rate stabilization. It ends up going into unappropriated reserves. My understanding, this is basically fund accounting being done and trying to apply generally accepted accounting principles to it. And the situation is, it should really be designed that it should have a nil at the bottom. And if we're making money in this fund, then technically that means that there was money available that should have gone to UNA for UNA's purposes. So, I really think next year we have to be involved in the audit process and reviewing this.
You are not you're not wrong. Let me put it this way. There is a section in the statement, you can call that unappropriate reserve. That is the part of money that right now exactly is all those amount being left without a designated usage for it. So might be in the future, I would say that there could be further discussion of that. But so far there is no specific, I would say, agreement is circling around that. Yeah.
The neighbors agreement doesn't really address this, but basically, if this is money that comes from our services levy and ends up being a surplus after we've done all the fund appropriations, that should be funds that are available to UNA without any strings attached. And I think it's something we have to have a discussion about.
And I guess one of my questions was somewhat related to this. And it's just what is the unappropriated reserve in the neighbors fund? In other words, it seems like it is a place, a destination for some of these small variances or whatever, but ultimately, what is it available for? Is it available kind of like a contingency reserve in the case sometime in the distant future something goes terribly wrong and the neighbors levy doesn't yield anywhere close to what is needed to fund the operations? Or I guess I'm wondering what happens to the unappropriated reserve.
The money stays in the fund. As I said, the UBC doesn't take away the money. The money stays in the fund, but it's just the usage of that amount has not been assigned yet. So this is just an open amount that I think further decision or discussion, may be needed.
Okay, thank you. Can we return? I think Athena had one other question to answer, or did you have any more that you were going to add?
I think, let's circle back to question number 1. For question number 1, I'll let Paul to address that. If Paul, you don't mind to take the mic.
Yeah, so the question that was raised is whether the UNA should have a representative that participates in some way in the audit of the Neighbors Fund in this process. And I think that the question went on to make the statement that the Neighbors Fund is being held in trust by UBC on behalf of the residents. And I'm not sure of that definition. The Neighbors Fund is a UBC account, and UBC receives all of the Neighbors Fund levies from residents and commercial properties into that account, and then disperses it based on the neighbors agreement or the set out deposits into reserves. So it's never been a role that the UNI's taken as participating in that audit of the fund, and I'm not sure what the role would be. It's certainly something we can ask the question of UBC about, but it wasn't something that we could provide an answer to in the immediate term, other than if that's something that the board has an interest in. It might be useful if that's made as a formal request, perhaps through some correspondence on behalf of the board, so that we can get a formal answer to it.
Okay, are there any other questions related to the Neighbors Fund financial statement report? Well, there's one from Michael. Yeah.
It's it's a little bit of a question in looking at specifically the utilities. There's no like metrics associated with them, and I'm just wondering, like, I've asked for this a couple times, like how much water are we using? How much electricity are we using? It's going to come up later, but I just kind of want to point that out, that that's a very big number in utility cost with no like billing information. And anyway, I'm going to bring it up later in a new business. So,
Paul?
I was just saying, it's not an item for us to discuss as part of the audit of the Neighbors Fund. It is a new business item, and I know that Wegland can respond to it in terms of some work that's ongoing with UBC utilities. Let's just save that for the news business item.
Okay, Sandy?
Similarly, it's about the expenses regarding the athletics fees. It's about $779,000. I'm wondering, do we have the usage statistics regarding the athletics? Thank you.
There is a specific calculation for that fee that's part of the neighbors agreement, and it is a set fee. Some of these questions are, this isn't really the time reviewing this for information item on the audit of the Neighbors Fund. You did raise this question previously, and I outlined in that meeting that there's a calculation in the agreement that calculates that number, and it's a flat rate number. It's not based on usage. It's essentially based on a population formula, if I recall correctly. But that might be a question for not on this particular topic, but at some other kind of larger governance UBC UNA relationships discussion.
So yeah, there are a few things kind of that are circulating here. One is just some people might wish more information regarding the what is in the neighbors agreement relating to the UBC withdrawals from the neighbors fund, if you will. And can I just ask staff? I guess Paul would be the one to ask if any board members have informational questions like that. What would be the best avenue for them to convey those questions? Could they send an email to you? Is that and then if once they get information, they think some kind of action needs to be taken, then that would be something that could later come before the board.
Yeah, at any time when a board member has questions around the neighbors agreement or what's required under it, If you send those questions in to us, we can certainly look at them and try to respond directly. We will provide the information to all board members whenever we ask those kinds of questions. And if there is if there is further discussion that's necessary, or then we can bring it forward to the board as a discussion point, and the board can give some direction on it. Yeah.
Okay, Jake?
I'm not clear on why can't Athena send through a written response to the questions that were sent out? I don't get that.
It's important, from my perspective, from a board governance perspective, that these meetings are held in public for a reason, and those questions should come in the public forum from board members, and then the responses will be provided in the public forum. And that's why the questions should be answered in this kind of shape and form, rather through some, because it's about a particular item on the agenda versus questions that for example, we just talked about the example of perhaps Director Song asking a question around the neighbors fund calculation. It's part of board transparency and working with the community to make sure that those questions and answers are, when they relate to items on the agenda, are done in the public forum, not in a separate and private discussion. We try to operate as close to the sort of municipal governance model as we can. And we don't have the same legislation that applies, but if we did, those kinds of outside of the public conversations and discussions would be contrary to legislation and would be problematic. So we try to format things in a similar way for the UNA, really along the lines of making sure that we're being as transparent as possible. We can do both. I mean, we can do belt and suspenders, but it's really important that
Turn off your mic.
what happens in the open meeting. That's the point I was trying to.
So Athena has answered in our public meeting. She's answered the questions that were provided, and I think it's from my perspective, it's fine to ask for a written summary of her points as a follow-up to the meeting. In other words, she's on the agenda item in the public forum, she's answered the question. So I don't see why we couldn't request a written follow-up to summarizing the answers, because it's hard for us to keep everything, for me anyway, to keep everything in mind. So I don't see a problem with asking for a written follow-up to questions that were addressed at the meeting. And could you turn your mic off, Ron? Well, Jake's following up this question. Thanks.
So if it's part of the public, for the public to view, why couldn't the answers be written and be in the presentation? Like, I still don't understand why they can't be written down and displayed here. She had the answers. She's reading from notes. She's not reading from memory.
So there is a process that the board has in the determination of the agenda items and the information that goes forward to the public through an agenda package. There are deadlines for that. When we have questions that come in this period between the package going out and the meeting, we do not have the resources nor the time to nor the process for us to insert those kinds of written responses into the agenda package. The package has been set. We're not in a position to change that. It is the package that's going to the public. It's been made public, and we wouldn't make changes to that. I think the best route is if the board needs and wants to have written responses to these kinds of questions, that we may want to look at the process of adding written questions that are brought forward in this kind of between the package going out and the board meeting, bringing them forward under new business, and getting the board to provide some direction as to whether we should provide written responses, which then also I would suggest need to come forward for information in a subsequent package, so that residents are also, and any public that need to be aware of the processes are aware of them.
Ron?
Sorry.
Okay, no,
No, I need to comment here. I think that's a lot of bureaucratic runaround. The questions were posed, the package was sent out, then the questions were posed. So I still don't understand why those couldn't have been presented in writing. To me, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
I'm sorry. Jay, could you just clarify? So presented in writing, are you talking about just as a reply all to the board members, or in what way? In where?
In the package, they could have been presented, here's the answers to the questions.
But the package came out before the questions came. I'm trying to like think about process, like how this would work. So the package came out.
So then how should the questions get back to the public? The questions were asked because the package came out. So the package is sent by the.
Well, let me talk, I have the answer.
To me, it's runaround. Yes.
Look, I'm reiterating the processes that the board has in place. It's the board's processes and policies that drive how we do this. We have certain deadlines. We have an expectation that all the materials that are considered by the board are made public as part of that process ahead of the meeting. If we get questions, they then need to be addressed in the public at that meeting, unless the board directs something differently. And I think that's the point that the chair is trying to make. If there needs to be a written response to the questions, that is a direction the board could give, and we could provide that again in a subsequent meeting so that the public's also aware. The injection of additional information into the package once it's been sent is really just contrary to the board's current processes and the timings that are required under those processes for these to be public and open and transparent discussions.
So I have two comments on making this. One, it's very simple. You give the board these written responses, we can attach that as an addendum to the minutes that were available to all the residents. They can look at it at their own leisure. Secondly, at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting, I'd asked Athena if we could, as the three of us, could get copies of this financial statements for Neighbors Fund earlier. If we'd gotten the copies earlier, my questions would have been there earlier. They would have been in the material. Okay. And that would have gone out to the board. So we wouldn't be having this conversation. She would have had written answers at the time.
So I guess I would suggest that the board is welcome to request written summaries of responses. The board is also welcome to ask, like, to make a motion and vote on it to have answers or some kind of written report publicized in some way. So it's totally possible to do these things, but we can't just ad hoc this is, we have board rules of procedure, and we can't ad hoc modify our records. Essentially, that is the pre-circulated meeting package. Like that's an official record, and that we have guidelines for our minutes. They function in a certain way. So, but the board can revisit the rules of procedure. That I think we should give a due consideration to that before we go ahead. But also, the board can ask for some kind of public posting of information of whatever sort that they wish. Dave has a point.
And just in excuse me, and just in follow up to Councillor Bourgeois' comment about minutes, if these questions had been raised at this meeting as questions, they would be minuted, and that would be public. Is that a suitable? Assuming that's correct, are the minutes a suitable way for councillors and the public to, have these written responses documented within an existing process? Does that satisfy? Would that satisfy your, no desire, I think, to have reasonable desire to have these things documented?
Our
our minutes have not functioned in that way to date. So I think that would require consideration by the board, just, kind of what goes in the minutes and what's the function of the minutes. And the board can ultimately, decide on its own rules of procedure. So we could discuss that further, but I would suggest that we, again, give that due deliberation. If that's something that people wish to take up, it would probably need to start with a discussion in the Governance and Human Resources Committee. And I'm not averse to that kind of thing, but I just want to note that we have rules of procedure in place, and I think with good reason. Generally, they allow for the the kind of predictability and public scrutiny of a quasi-municipal organization, and so I would caution us against doing ad hoc additions or changes to our approach to minutes or to meeting packages for that matter. But we certainly could take that up if it's of interest to this board. Is there anything else at this time relating to the Neighbors Fund financial statement report? And I just want to clarify, did anyone wish to request for the board's eyes a written summary of the answers to the questions that were presented here? Jake, okay. So I don't. Yeah.
The reason being is I don't remember the first response to the first question.
Absolutely, and I'm with you. My memory.
It's done.
So,
not to have a written response.
Yeah. So my memory is equally short, and when it comes to numbers, even shorter. And so I don't think that we need a motion here, but we would just ask, in due time, if Athena, if you could provide to the board a summary of your responses just for our information, so that we can make sure that we're operating with the full knowledge of how the Neighbors Fund financial statement is derived, and kind of what especially in areas that we don't fully understand exactly how the numbers were derived. I think you provided some helpful answers, and if you could summarize those for us, we would appreciate it. Is there any other?
Happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on that agenda item? Okay, thank you. We now move to the Finance and Audit Committee report. And Athena, I hope you're not getting too tired here. The 2025-26 second quarter financial report.
Okay. I'm not getting too tired as long as you're not too tired of me. The second quarter report is the Finance and Audit Committee do review it, and then we actually make a slight revision of the statement and added some column, which I hope you find it satisfied right now. Otherwise, I don't think I have anything more to add. The report is before you. Feel free to ask me if you have any questions. Yeah.
Okay, are there any questions on the Q2 financial report? All right, not hearing any. Thanks, Athena. You have been busy, and appreciate you being able to join us, even though you're traveling, and wish you well.
Thank you. Thank you.
We now move on to the Governance and Human Resources Committee report, and we have one item here. This is the UNA Community Newspaper governance report. And so I'll turn things over to Glenda to get this started, and then after that we'll consider the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to present the proposed updates to the community newspaper policy and the newspaper editorial committee's terms of reference. Just wanted to add some additional context to this whole process. The current newspaper policy and terms of reference were developed by staff and board in 2022, following the loss of the independent contractor and original publisher of the Campus Resident. The staff and previous board explored several options on how to continue with the publication of the paper, including looking for other independent contractors, but ultimately the current structure was supported because it was the most cost effective, and it also created opportunities for community building through participation and grassroots journalism. The revisions that are put forward today reflect the evolution of the paper over the past 2 years, and they also reflect what we've learned from staff, volunteers, contributors, and readers of the newspaper as it continues to grow into a publication that is widely valued by residents. I want to acknowledge that some directors have expressed thoughtful concerns about the independence, accountability, and appropriate role of the board. These concerns are well appreciated and well received. I think they reflect a shared desire to ensure that the paper remains focused, responsible, and community oriented. I do think that supporting these revisions reinforce exactly that. I think it reinforces a newspaper that is guided by board policy, supported by professional staff, and steered and produced by residents, and ultimately shaped by the people who it serves. The editorial independence in this context isn't about detaching the paper from the UNA, but it's about ensuring that content decisions are made by the people that it serves, and it's guided by the board's clear policy. It protects the integrity and the perceived impartiality of the newspaper and the board. And again, the paper is well loved in our community. Residents read it, they recognize themselves in it, and they contribute to it. And I think that ultimately these revisions support the growth of it and protecting it and nurturing it as a valued publication in the community. Happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, I think we could just start out with the motion and then open up a discussion and see where things go from there. So I will start by making the motion that the UNA board endorse the revised UNA community newspaper policy number 04-03 and the revised newspaper editorial committee terms of reference as presented. Could I get a seconder? Seconded by Evan. So with that, we can move into discussion. And I wanted to just say a few words as well, speaking to a little bit of the history of the newspaper and then the revived newspaper in 2023. And Glenda described what things look like until 2022. Actually, it was from 2010 to 2022. The Campus Resident was run by John Tompkins, who was an independent contractor, and he had there was a community newspaper policy that guided that relationship, right? And it laid out kind of what the goals of the newspaper were to be, whatever. And John Tompkins served as the editor. For all I know, he didn't have an editorial board, but nonetheless, in keeping with the general community newspaper policy, he made the editorial decisions as to what to run in the newspaper, how to edit particular articles, and that kind of thing. And when John passed away, suddenly, very untimely and much regretted loss, the newspaper went on hiatus, and then the board in 2023 then sought a way to revive the newspaper, and because it was not seen to be feasible to find an independent contractor like John Tompkins, kind of the circumstances that allowed him to do this for probably relatively little income on his part. Um, that the decision was to move the newspaper in-house, but to try to create a structure that would, allow for meeting the community newspaper policy, that is, serve the 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 goals, the interests of residents and of the UNA in the broader sense of publicizing, UNA related information as well as information of interest to the community. And so that's where we ended up with the current structure. The, the, the one thing that was very unusual about that structure, as I see it, is that you had elected board members serving on an editorial committee that kind of combined operations of the newspaper to a certain extent, and then the editorial work of soliciting articles, selecting articles, editing articles, and so that's what I think. Although at the beginning, as the newspaper was getting reestablished, I think it was helpful to have board members on there. And I'll be frank, like I've been on that committee from the start, and kind of had a vision of my own, kind of inspired by John Tompkins in a way, of how we could realize this with this newspaper and kind of continue in that tradition, but under a new structure. But in my view, I think the newspaper policy, community newspaper policy, is quite clear about the expectations for the newspaper, and when the job description for the editor, makes it clear what the newspaper is supposed to do, and I've come to really think that we don't really need to have board members involved with the nitty-gritty editorial work of the newspaper, but the newspaper needs to remain accountable, of course, to the board more broadly, and that's done through quarterly reports already, and that would continue. So that's the impetus. It's to make the editorial committee more truly an editorial committee, and that is removing the direct participation of elected board members in that editorial work. So yes, questions, Michael?
So, so I'm just wondering, like, just getting back to the adage, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, what's sort of problematic about this structure as it exists that we need to change it? I mean, not that I'm adverse to changing it. Is sort of, that's the first question, and then the second one, possibly more of a suggestion. Like, once it is an independent board, the editor-in-chief is recruiting their own people, and then then they just have complete independence. Is that the idea? Well, let's start with the first question. Like, why change it? And then
I think the purpose before, or the main goal really, is to create a paper that's independent of any sort of influence apart from this editorial board. The board of when we were creating the terms of reference from the beginning, we added a couple of board members in there as to serve as I don't know, I want to say training wheels, so that we can see where it goes. I mean, again, this has been year 2 of this new structure. We're just trying to see, are they capable of managing themselves? Are they capable of, is there enough talent in the community who's excited about this and wants to participate, wants to be deeply, involved? And we see a lot of that. I think to answer your question about like if it broke, why fix it? We have had questions before of like how independent really is this paper if there's board members sitting on the editorial board. We get asked that not infrequently. We've had a couple of folks that we've tried to recruit who declined particularly because of that. So there is whether it's obviously it's all perceived bias, right? Like it's not happening in a practical sense. The chair is very good at making sure that the editorial board is impartial, but there is that perceived, yeah, perceived bias, I suppose. Sorry, your second question was.
I guess like, you know, in terms of changing the terms of reference for, you know, a major arm that I think is a very beneficial arm to the community. I love reading the paper. All my friends do. It's a really good, one of the strongest things I think about our community that holds us together. So that being said, would we not like, because I'm also in terms of the land use committee looking at sort of altering those terms of reference, but in doing so, I'm taking kind of a much longer approach to it. Like rather than just changing it and would it not like behoove us to really look at what it is that we want out of this, and then to take a little bit more time to actually have a comprehensive kind of shift in terms of writing terms of reference that are meant to stick for the long term and actually create not just perceived independence, but maybe a little bit more true independence and what that looks like, and just changing some wording in my mind doesn't necessarily do that. So I'm just wondering if we want to just.
I don't think it was changing wording, right?
Yeah.
Like it's changing the actual structure of the committee. So it's not it's not just wording the terms of reference, but the actual structure of the committee changes as well.
I also just note that according to the current structure, there are 2 UNA board members on the committee, and the chair of that committee is a UNA board member, and it has to be, right? That's in the terms of reference. And so I have been since 2023 the chair of the newspaper editorial committee. That means I run the meetings, and it's not that I have a veto or like a, you know, any more vote than anyone else, but in that role, there is a particular authority. And I will say that I and Evan, when he joined the committee, we've used our authority that comes from being, you know, in some ways the boss, right? Like indirectly we're the boss, right? We've used that cautiously and have not tried to impose any particular editorial line, or for that matter, you know, try to veto submissions of any kind. But there are 2 things. There's the perception that is possible, perhaps that even is happening, although I'm not sure there's any evidence to suggest that we've, you know, somehow pursued a particular editorial line or censored anybody. But there's a perception that there's a possibility of that perception, number one. And then given the structure, there's a possibility that at some time in the future, the UNA board designates on the committee could use their role differently. And so in some sense, I think this is a longer term vision of how the committee might continue. In the proposed changes, the community member participants, their role is similar. It remains advisory, and also, you know, they bring journalistic expertise or some other related skill. That's part of actually in the terms of reference that part of the recruitment for those members, and that doesn't change in the proposed changes here. So that's one thing. I also wanted to note, I know I've kind of referred to this as it's a somewhat strange arrangement where you have, again, elected officials who are on a committee. And although, again, neither Evan nor I has abused our position, but it has felt a little odd to be commenting on submissions for publication from our colleagues here on the board. I think, as many of you know, Jake's published a few things there. I've published a few things there, and it's a little, again, odd to comment on my own submissions, which I don't really. But again, it just seems that the resident community, editorial committee. Yeah.
I think you answered the question pretty well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going on a bit. Yeah.
But
and I'll have to say, part of the reason why I'm going on is I care so much.
I do. I
about
hear
this.
it in your voice.
Like you, Michael, the newspaper to me is just a gem of what we do.
And I really appreciate that. I guess that clarifies almost all my questions. I just had one final question, which is, how now is that managing editor chosen and or hired?
We hire through usual UNA hiring processes. So we recruited, we advertise for recruitment. I interview the candidates, and then they go through a panel interview with staff on the panel. The managing editor is essentially a staff member.
Okay, Jake.
I'm scouring through this your report, Glenda, and I'm sure I read it someplace, and maybe you can point out where. There was a statement that the requirement that the board must ensure sufficient resources are dedicated to the newspaper.
That is on the corporate policy.
What page?
59.
59?
It's 2.1. It's in the existing corporate policy on page 59. It's under item 2.1. And the change.
Members of the NC, no, 2.1. That's under UNA Board of Directors, page 59.
Yep.
The last part of it there too.
And it's also on page 62.
Oh,
in the
and
revised
ensuring
version.
sufficient, yeah, okay, yeah. So my question is, what constitutes sufficient resources? And does the one-liner that's in the current budget and last year's budget cover all these resources, i.e. direct expenses, staff time, communication resources, etc.?
It doesn't include the salary of the managing editor, but it does include all variable expenses. So printing, graphic design hours, snacks for their meetings, and their minute taker.
And where's the salary? What line
It
is
sits in
salary?
the salary GL, I suppose.
Yeah.
Tina can tell you where the line is.
Athena, yes.
Yes, sorry, I think, yeah. Thank you. I was waiting to address this part when this part come. So the newspaper line, as what Glenda mentioned, that included variable costs, mostly the per copy costs. But in terms of the fixed costs, such as staff and then the indirect staff costs, that is not included in there, and that is distributed either through the management, because Glenda oversee the department and she has a percentage to that, and management salary, and also there is the administrative salary. So they are all embedded into the UNA staff line. So that being said, for Q2, as of Q2, the overall spending is around 22 to 23K year to date. And then the next year budget, we are putting a number is 50, we're focusing around 58 K for budget for next year.
So that 58K does not include the managing editor's salary.
No, I'm sure the editor would not like to work with that kind of pay.
So what are the total costs for the newspaper? What's the budgeted total cost for this fiscal 27?
If it's only for the indirect costs, I mentioned that it will be just that 58K would be sufficient. But
The question was total cost for the newspaper.
because I don't think we factor into the indirect management costs. I can definitely add the editor's cost in that, but I don't think we have specifically factor how many percentage I think certain costs would that be. I can give you a rough number, but I don't think I can give you a specific number at this moment.
Purposes, it's not a question we can answer tonight, Jake. We'd have to actually go into the budget and provide the information. This isn't bringing forward this policy wasn't a budget discussion, but a policy discussion. So we aren't prepared for that, but we can certainly provide you that breakdown. I think one of the interesting things, and I think your question raises for me, I think a good point, because historically the editor position was editor / social media position, and we shifted that in last year's budget to a full-time editorial position. And it may be that in our budgets, we want to identify that shift in a slightly different way, because it was gathered in those kind of administrative staff costs for wages as a bucket because of its shared responsibilities. But from a clarity and transparency perspective in the budget, it may be something that we want to adjust going forward. But to answer that's a different answer to your question. I think to answer your question, what's the total cost? We can't provide that to you tonight, but we certainly can circulate it to the board to follow that up.
So if we're being asked to accept this policy, then I can't see supporting something that just says ensuring sufficient resources are dedicated to the newspaper. To me, that's an open checkbook.
Jake, that's not what we're being asked to support right now. We're being asked to support the changes, and the changes don't include that. The original terms of reference in the corporate policy state ensuring sufficient resources. So if we want to bring that up at a later date, that's not what we're being asked to look at. And you make a good point. It's a valid point, but it's not the changes aren't changing that wording right now. And we can look at changing that wording if we need to, but the changes are, the changes are not, they're around the wording. The wording stated that in the original corporate policy that was approved by the board whenever. So it's a good point, but not what the motion is on the table currently.
Sandy?
I support the current policy. The reason is, in regarding of the independence, the board member as us, we were elected by the residents. We are representing residents. If the managing editorial is our staff, is our management team, is not representing residents. So for me, I think now the current policy is representing the independence. The first one. Second one is regarding the vice chair. It will be the resident, and it will be the volunteers elected from the committee. I'm not sure if the vice chair can be full-time worked on it or is qualified for this, and will it be increase some salaries, some more fees for the vice chair? So I support the current policy. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure. Do we need a clarification, perhaps from Glenda, about the vice chair? And also, could you speak to how the newspaper editorial committee is constituted? In other words, it being a committee of residents, just a little bit about, who's on that committee?
Yeah, so the newspaper editorial committee is recruited through the board. We put out advertisements and we recruit from the community. The members of the NEC have to be UNA members, and to be a UNA member, you have to be a UNA resident. So this is a committee that is composed by your neighbors, basically. The vice chair role is also voluntary. It only serves as an alternate to the managing or to the chair in case the chair is unavailable for meetings. It would be an unpaid position, same as the other positions in that committee. So it's an unpaid and voluntary.
And from my understanding, it wouldn't be a particularly onerous additional duty. It's communicating with the managing editor once a month about the agenda, that kind of thing. It's not.
That's right. Yeah, they have meetings once a month. They establish their agenda through email, and then they sit down. They have their meeting. They discuss their editorial direction for and what kind of stories they're going to be publishing for the next month, and then yeah.
Michael?
Can I make a suggestion? Because I think that I too have like along with Sandy, just some slight hesitancy on the format by which it's being suggested that the new committee chair is hired. I think that like the NEC as the committee as it is constituted is almost the best body to actually look at and go through the hiring process, not necessarily of the chair.
They will elect their chair.
Well, I think it's almost like it should be something that like with the NEC's consultation that be formulaic in written out in this process. I just think that to have this position be completely independent and to have it be hired 100% by UNA staff, I think it's doing the opposite almost. I'm wondering if there's a role for that process of hiring to actually to be part of that NEC committee that is already probably well established, and then sort of going through that hiring process and then suggesting whomever that candidate would be to the board for final approval, kind of thing. But I don't know if I'm comfortable changing it to be, you know what I mean?
No, I do just want to say, like, it's not going to be a completely rogue committee. You have oversight through your policies that you're enacting right now, right?
I'm not concerned about anything going rogue. I'm just concerned about it entirely under the auspices of the UNA operations and them being the ones like in charge of hiring what I see as a very, very important position, both within the community and for the newspaper and operations.
So also just to clarify the hiring process, when we're hiring for skill. So,
I get it.
Yeah, so when we put out an ad, it's really a call for a person with these skills, right? Ability to manage volunteers, ability to have worked with editorial boards previously, is able to write, is able to edit. So those are the things that we hire for. And the managing editor's role in that committee really is to provide technical expertise. And the direction of the stories, the direction of the paper, the type of stories that they publish is still, there's still that whole committee that makes those decisions.
100%. I totally get it, and I get the independence, and I get the impetus for it. I'm just questioning the hiring process of this one position.
So,
And I think that it would behoove us to, rather than completely detach the process from the board's appointment position, to just have that final candidate, once they've gone through whatever scrutiny they need to go through within the UNA, in their final appointment is just at the board's final vote.
so there are a couple of things here. One has to do, Michael, I just want to make sure. Okay. Michael, I want to answer or speak to a couple of things that you brought up. First of all, there's just the question of, at the actual NEC meetings, the editorial committee meetings, who chairs the meeting? And Ron, could you hold off? I'd like to keep us together here. Yeah, thanks. There's just the question of who moves through the agenda, who sets the agenda, and just de facto the managing editor is preparing a list of possible stories that they then get input from. Like, if you look at the actual, just de facto, the agendas of those newspaper editorial committee meetings, almost every single item on that agenda is run by the chair, and then the committee members offer input, and there's discussion and that kind of thing. So it just,
I get it, Eagle.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that you're asking right now in this change to pry a pretty major role away from the board in terms of its responsibility in appointing that chair. Right? Because prior, the chair was a board member. In the previous, is that correct?
Yeah, currently.
Yeah.
So the way that works.
Which is an elected position.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now you're looking at putting that chair is now a completely hired position that is completely hired by the UNA operations team without any board input. Am I wrong?
So the way that the meetings currently run is, technically I'm the chair, right? The board appointee. And so I open the meeting and I say something about the minutes, and then I say, okay, next up, we're going to talk about stories, a manual. Next up, we're going to do this, a manual, right? Because the business of the meeting is having to do with, putting together the issue of the month, right? And that involves the managing editor managing and then discussing, questions about what stories to run and this kind of thing with so the chair doesn't have power in that sense.
So you're just this is just saying that we're just moving the chair position over to the managing editor, who is already hired by UNA staff.
That's right.
So that hiring process is already in place.
Yes. And if in the future, I mean, we have a managing editor, he's actually online, I think. But if in the future the board was interested in pursuing the possibility of some kind of community input in that, I mean, that's I guess something to talk about in the future. But that's not. We're not changing anything about how, with these proposed changes, we're not changing anything about how the editor is hired, or really actually the de facto role of the editor in these meetings, which is the editor really does run the meetings effectively. So, yeah. Are there any other questions?
I guess I'm just looking. I hear a lot of board reluctance to approve this. I'm not that reluctant to approve this. However, I want to figure out a way in which we get board consensus in approving this. And I think that it has to do with this idea that sort of Sandy put forward, that like now there's absolutely zero board input into the running of this newspaper. Correct? Even though we're funding it. Yeah, so I'm just, that's I think that the concern. Am I wrong?
I would say that it's laid out in the UNA community newspaper policy, which is a board approved policy that, you know, it says that the purpose of the newspaper is to report on the operations of and services offered by the UNA, to provide information on matters of interest to the UNA community. Like it's really clearly laid out what the scope of the editor's you know, position is and what the newspaper, what kinds of things the newspaper is supposed to cover. And I'll tell you that the current editor is really aware of that scope, and that's as should be, because that's part of the job description, right? So in that sense, you know, we as a board have already laid out what kinds of things the newspaper would be covering, not the specific editorial questions of should we run this story this month or that, because that's where residents are crucially important, because you want to know kind of what's going on and what do residents care about. So yeah, but I'd say in the end, if the board does, you know, I mean, you can vote how you want. If the board doesn't want to make any changes, we'll just keep things as they are. I mean, we've already kind of run through some of the sort of the perception issues and the potential, but not the actual kind of conflict with our own governance mandate. But really, yeah, no question. Actually, the newspaper, I have to say, runs pretty well. So. But I don't think these changes would in any way detract from that. Are there any more questions or points that anyone wishes to raise? Okay, I think we'll call the question then. And I've learned from our rules of procedure that I don't have to repeat the motion. And so the motion is before you. All in favor, please raise your hand. All right, one in favor. Opposed? 1, 2, 3 opposed. And I just want to, I can ask for abstentions, but I kind of think we should be taking positions on the motions that come before us. So if, you know, I would urge us to only abstain in really rare cases. That's kind of our I suppose our public commitment is to even sometimes take positions on difficult things. But so we have 1 in favor, 3 opposed, and any abstentions? Okay, 2 abstentions. Okay, so the motion fails. And what I would suggest is that at the very least we go back to the Governance and Human Resources Committee with this and make not those substantive changes to the composition of the board, but to update the board, the community newspaper policy and the NEC policy to reflect the actual, like the switch from the online quarterly publication, because there are just some things that are out of date, and that can come back to the board. Yeah. Okay, so on Paul's advice, I will move that we refer this back to the committee to make those updates to the or to consider updates to the community newspaper policy and the NEC, what is it, the rules, terms of yeah, of procedure, and just to update them to make sure that they're accurate given the changes that were made to the newspaper circulation. Can I have a second for that motion to refer? Seconded by Evan. All in favor? Sorry. I got 1, 2, 3. Okay, opposed? Abstentions? Can you not vote? Is that allowed? Fine, motion passes. Okay, with that, I think we should break for dinner, and we will come back. Let's reconvene at 7:30. No, 7:35. 15 minutes, yeah, 7:35, and we have a little bit more open session business, but not a lot, and then relatively little closed session. Okay. this is an opportunity for us to raise any questions, if anyone has questions that were not answered before. Dave, you introduced it at the last meeting. If there's anything additional you'd like to say, you could, but I wouldn't necessarily expect that. Okay. All right. So the report is before you, and if there were any questions that you were not prepared to raise at the last meeting, you're very welcome to do so now. Yes, Jake.
Yeah, great report. I said that last time. It's still a great report. And I don't know if I just missed this on last time, but on page 78, talks about facilities usage. You have the percentages for the gym, like it's 99% full dance studio, going all the way down to 3%, 17, 21, 31, 34%. Are there opportunities to do something to bump those up?
Great question. Yes, there is. So this is the challenge that we face when we are looking at facility space is what is prime time, what is not prime time. And there's plenty of opportunities for us to develop programs, to provide opportunities for social groups and other people. And we've begun to do that during the non-prime times. But what we do get and where we run into trouble is that we get the majority of the demand that we have comes between 3 o'clock to going into 9 o'clock in the evening. So yes, we are running some programs in that area. It's also the area that when we get discussion groups that come forward, we try to get them to know that, hey, in the middle of our afternoon, we do have some rooms available. We do have space available in these areas.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Sandy?
I saw that it's statistics regarding the aquatic arena, tennis, and fitness recreation centers. It's good. Thank you for providing all the numbers. So I also look at the the NA neighborhood agreement that mentioned about the fee we paid UBC on athletics fees. It's some 2 ways. One is 8% of all the fee. Another is there. My question is it possible for us to calculate the statistics we collected now, comparing the fees we paid to UBC now? I saw that we can review the number we pay to UBC on 2027, 2028 budget. Perhaps now we can do some homework and review it and see if it is benefit for UNA to pay that number. From my calculation, I thought it's not that high, like $770,000. Thank you.
Sorry, Dave, is there anything, I mean, that was not necessarily a question, but do you have anything you want to say regarding that?
Yeah, it's a great idea. A lot of our numbers come from UBC. I can certainly advocate for that and bring it up at our next meeting with UBC Athletics and Recreation, and get back to the board as to whether this can be done. That's the best I can do at this time.
Which page, Sandy, which page of the report were you referring to? Or, oh, sorry, I thought there was a particular statistic that was listed. No, this is something that you would like, but we don't have. Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah, are there any other questions for Dave? Okay, thanks so much again. This is a huge step forward for all of us, I think. It's great to have these seasonal reports. We have under new business, we have 2 things that were raised by
Michael. And so Michael, the first one is sustainability and infrastructure discussion. And so, yep. Okay, so I'll turn things over to you to introduce that, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I guess this is a piece of business that I'm not exactly sure, and I would love the board's maybe suggestion on how to address this. But essentially, in reviewing the neighbors agreement and in viewing and reading all of the various documents that are related to infrastructure as it relates to UBC, UBC Properties Trust, Campus and Community Planning, and the UNA, there's so much overlap and there's so much nitty gritty, and we're even finding out today that there's some things we're paying for that maybe we shouldn't be paying for. I I would really love to somehow figure out a way to get our sort of operations and sustainability initiatives from the UNA's perspective really parsed out, like on a map, so that we can see it and we can tell where it is that we have responsibilities, what those responsibilities are, how they fit into our operational budget. I've advocated for this for a while now, but this idea of like, how much water are we using? And now that we see that we're paying $661,000 in utility costs for stormwater and other things, those numbers are incredibly important to know. And can we reduce them? I mean, are those stormwater costs reducible by the UNA doing things that would align with sustainability goals in terms of water usage, but also and so I don't even know where to start with this, because I don't even know what we're in control of and what we're not. And I just haven't seen any clear documentation in regards to that. And like I'm coming from a background as a sustainability coordinator on a small, very small campus in comparison to this one. But at the same time, we had live tracking of a lot of stuff, and we were able to, monitor our water and electrical and gas and all the other utility usage on a daily or hourly basis if we needed to. Whereas here, I don't again, this is something that I'm not sure how to deal with, but I'm just wondering if what are the steps that we need to do to really put the neighbors agreement and our relationship from an operational standpoint with UBCPT, UBC Campus and Community Planning, and any other entity that might exist, UEL. How do we put that into some sort of visual form that we can reference? And then how then do we go about monitoring our utility usage? I like that. It's a question, because I really don't know how we go about doing that. But good practice would be that we do that and we have the ability to monitor it live and be able to then, once we have that ability to monitor it, see where we can make, reductions that would fit both our financial and fiduciary responsibilities as an organization, but also ones that would meet, sustainability and environmental and ecological goals. So that's something that it's a very open-ended question, and I present it to the staff to sort of help me to clarify how to answer that. And that's really what I'm getting at. And in doing so, could the land use committee be of any help in doing that? Because we are looking at a terms of reference for the land use committee as it relates to, sustainability within the UNA, as well as our relationship with campus and community planning as we plan the land use and hope to plan it better and have a better feedback loop with them. But is there also a feedback loop that could exist within our own operations, within the UNA, that could be a part of that advisory body? So that's the new business as it relates to sustainability. Thank you.
So it's, you described like a very broad and deep approach to sustainability in an organization. And I, like you, have worked in organizations where there's much more robust kind of tracking, real-time tracking available. Frankly, we just don't have the resourcing levels or the structure in place to do that with the UNA. So it's more, and we're just so nascent. I mean, you can imagine we have 3 people in an operations department, one of which is a sustainability coordinator that's responsible for a whole wide range of things that don't go to this kind of level of detail that you're talking about. I think when Wegland can speak to some of the work internally that we're doing now. I mean, we are a receiver of utilities from UBC, and so we get billings from UBC, then we pay those bills. We're trying to work with UBC utilities to provide us with, at the operational level, some more detail on those things around water usage, so that at least on that particular topic, because you and other board members have raised that as a concern, we can start there and understanding what our consumptions look like, where the consumptions, and just have some historical data that we can start to work off of. We're not there yet. Wegland's working on that. We have, had projects that have been kind of proposed internally to move us along on this journey of sustainability understanding as an organization. And quite frankly, they've not reached the priority to be adopted at the board as part of the budget. So you'll see when the budget's presented this year, we do have a very quite an expensive project that's on our list of projects that we haven't brought forward in the budget because quite frankly we just can't fit it in, which would start the process towards what you're talking about. So I think this conversation is probably a good one to have when the budget is before the board, and you'll see those projects, and we can talk a little bit more in detail about what those might entail. But that's about some external consultants helping us set some data baselines, understanding of where we stand in many of these lines of either resource use or emissions production, whatever the case may be, and then be able to start to build a program and a plan off of that to reduce those, control those, manage those in a more appropriate way. So I think it's a big topic, and it's not one that we've been ready as an organization to really tackle, other than in these kind of piecemeal bits and pieces. And Wegland, I don't know if you've got more to add to what I've said.
Could I also just add, when UBC undertook the neighborhood climate action plan work, they did do quite a bit to establish baselines for energy use, water use, a whole bunch of things. So they have a lot of technical data that some of which is available in that NCAP, those NCAP materials, but others of which may not be there to the detail that you're asking, but that might be available. So I do think that, because as Paul was alluding to, UBC controls a lot of the inputs and outputs, so to speak, of energy, water, wastewater, all those things. They kind of flow literally and financially through UBC, and they seem to have a lot of information to set those baselines in the NCAP. So I think that's worth pursuing, to see if there is data that we haven't otherwise seen. Sorry, I cut off Wegland your opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Paul. Just to add a little bit in terms of how UBC Utilities is charging. So typically, the billing that especially for water consumption, it only comes in almost like on a quarterly basis. So it's lacking. And for example, we just received the billing for the summertime, about maybe back in 20 days ago. And so it means there are some restrictions in terms of monitoring, whether we will get the real-time monitoring on numbers coming in. And in terms of work that we follow up, we certainly hear the board interest in terms of the water consumption. So we did follow up with UBC utilities after that board meeting. I believe it's a September board meeting, specifically regarding waterway cleanup. So unfortunately, it hits the UBC utilities October billing period. So they got my request in terms of getting the actual consumptions. Speaking of the irrigation and water consumptions from the public space, we request to have a historical number of actual consumptions coming back from UBC. So we are waiting for UBC utilities to provide the number. And I think that would be a good start for us to identify if there is an abnormal usage, is there a high consumptions, or if there's a leak, for example, coming from a water feature. And another thing, like Paul had mentioned, I think it's very important for us to have a benchmark, but I think it is more of a good discussion for the board, thinking forward in terms of how to plan to have a sustainability benchmarking, thinking about the UNA operations from the facilities to our municipal operations team, as well as water usage. So I think that's a lot of good points that's been taken away. And I will leave it in here and happy to answer any more questions.
I just add one more thing to that. From a policy perspective, I've also raised it with mostly with community and campus planning about water features in general and the future of water features. And I know that there is some discussion going on for UBC on campus, because they also have a lot of water features that have fairly significant water use. And so there's an interest, I think, on both sides here about getting a better understanding what the future looks like for those things. So our first step is to have some data. At least then we can have a conversation with the board to know what it looks like in terms of a kind of financial cost. But then I think there's a bigger discussion about, well, then what do we do? Do we start to dismantle some of the existing waterways or convert them into something else, which has impacts on the community in terms of expectations and neighborhood amenities and that kind of. So it's a bigger discussion that comes along with that. But again, as I said, I think as Wegman said, at least on the water side, we've got to start with some historical data understanding.
And just to elaborate a little bit more on Paul's point is definitely there's a lot of discussion, and also there's a key part of getting more input from the residents as well. So I can foresee there's a lot of engagement opportunities to seek input from the residents to prioritize what is the highest priority in terms of sustainability goal and go from there. So yep, I'll leave it at that. Michael.
So when we mention, Paul, when you mentioned that, we just don't have the capacity from an operations standpoint to even begin to sort of tackle this, I would make the point, like, maybe I speak for myself here, but I'm saying, well, why don't we have the capacity? Why aren't we being requested as a board to increase the capacity? Because as it relates to sustainability and operational issues, like the 2024 neighbors agreement drastically expands our oversight of certain operations and certain, maintenance, things that we are responsible for now. And to say that, and then what I'm also hearing is that we are 100% reliant upon the sort of data and the good faith of asking UBC for this information, which doesn't sit very well with me as a board member, where we went through this whole values thing and setting our agenda for the next 3 years, and one of the core things of that was an environmental and a sustainability principle and value, and we simply can't do that work unless we know what it is that we're responsible for. And again, I get back to this idea of a map. Like, I look at the map from the UNA and I look at the map from the UBC, and I can't tell where one touches the other and what we're responsible for and what they are and what UBC Properties Trust is doing. And it shocks me every time I see UBC Properties Trust do something in the middle of the neighborhood that I don't know. They just do it. So that's what I'm talking about. Is like, if there is an expansion of operations that needs to occur, or expansion of sustainability coordination that needs to occur within that operations, then we need to talk about that. We need to talk about that yesterday. And we need to include that in our budget proposal, because we need to have some vision for what the future is going to be here, because our operations responsibilities are just going to grow along with the neighborhood, and along with and there already, I see holes. I already, like, physical holes sometimes, but I already see holes in that and bylaws that need to be written and things of that nature. And I think that we are already falling behind, and it's only been a matter of months. So I think that I mean, when I talk about sustainability, I'm talking about not just environmental, I'm talking about the maintenance sustainability of the neighborhood. We have character to the sidewalks. They were designed a certain way, and when they're maintained or repoured or something like that, the character should be maintained as well. And it hasn't been in a couple of instances that I've seen. And it's just little things like that, but I think we need to get a handle on this. And I think that we need to have sort of a visionary look at that. And again, I might be speaking for myself here, tell me if I am, but this is why I bring it up as new business, because as we look forward in our budgeting process, we should really be thinking about, well, what does it take to get our operations department up to snuff to deal with all the things that is within the neighbors agreement, just that. And then what does it take to actually expand that sustainability coordinator role into one that can actually look at all this stuff holistically and say, you know, this is what we should be doing with water. Or maybe we should just have a education event where we let the neighborhood know that all of the water features are not being reused water. It is fresh water that we're all dumping down the drain. And I don't think board members even know that. But anyway, things like that, I think that we really need to push a little harder on.
I mean, I can't disagree with your voicing a priority that I think is not new to the UNA. And I think the unique aspect of the UNA is that financially we can't operate the way a municipality would, where we would decide on the things we want to do, establish the budget for that, and then that would create the taxation level that property owners would then pay and support the budget that we want. The reality of the UNA is that UBC to do certain things, and we receive our budget and we set our internal programs and our staffing levels based on what we will receive. So it's difficult for us to say, for example, what would a fully kitted out, as it were, operations and sustainability department look like? Probably half a dozen or more people, which we can simply, frankly, can't afford in the existing financial structure. So we have to prioritize things the way that we do, and that budget discussion is part of doing that. So we have brought forward new positions. The sustainability coordinator is a relatively new position that started as a part-time position, got turned into a full-time position, and it has slowly made its way forward. It's not, it hasn't just been status quo, but it's been looked at on an annual basis. And as I said, when we bring forward the budget, you will see projects in the project list that have been brought into the budget, and those that still remain on a project list that haven't been brought into the budget, which may go to addressing some of those aspects.
I just wanted to add something I've mentioned to Michael on the side recently. The Neighborhood Climate Action Plan has a lot of detailed goals moving forward, and many of them are ones that are that need to be undertaken by UBC. But there's also an explicit reference to things that the UNA will be doing over the next 3, 5, 10 years in order to, reduce the carbon impact, reduce, conserve water, reduce water use. I mean, there's a whole range of things where the UNA does have a role explicitly or perhaps implicitly. And I think in terms of thinking big and thinking forward, that we, the Land Use Advisory Committee might be a good place to start this, but to kind of review those areas that are laid out in the Neighborhood Climate Action Plan and think about, okay, what does this mean for the UNA as an organization in 3, 5, 10 years? And we have some great residents on that Land Use Advisory Committee who I think will be well positioned to help us think about those big things, everything from tree cover, water features, all of these things. So I think we have an opportunity there, and that might be a good place to keep this moving. And ultimately, we as a board and the next board as well after us will have to decide about resources, right? And those are difficult, but also possible decisions to be made at the board level in consultation with staff and UBC. Anything else for now on that, Michael? No. Okay. All right. So the next item is the wellness metrics discussion. So Michael, back to you to introduce that.
It's come out of a discussion with some members of the community who work at UBC and are really interested in revitalizing the idea of the campus as a living laboratory. And I think that there has been a lot of there's been a lot of polls out there that are dealing with that have been set by campus and community planning and things like that, looking at the neighborhood from a planning perspective. But I can just tell, from talking with previous board members or even people who have lived in this neighborhood for a lengthy period of time, that the overall community strength and maybe wellness ebbs and flows and is one that just if you took the annual general meeting, at some point in time in the past, there was a lot more attendees than there have been recently, and I think that there's some interest in us in sort of looking at it from this sort of more wellness perspective of the wellness of the community, and gaining those metrics. And I'm just sort of asking if the board in particular would be willing to engage with sort of different departments and faculties within sociology in particular to push forward, maybe dedicate a small amount of resources to start gathering some of these metrics in order to then put them into some research. It's a question for the board.
I can't speak for the Community Engagement Advisory Committee, but that actually does seem quite within their remit. So perhaps that's something that you could put a kind of a formal proposal together, or something for them to chew on and think and thinking about the. I mean, the board can, if there's an initiative that we wish to support, we can bring it to the board and if we want, vote to support it. So I think that's within our power, but it's more like, how do you kind of, set that up or get it started, right? And that might be Community Engagement Advisory Committee. And then we have, the Community Engagement Advisory Committee is also, if I understand correctly, working on another community survey that would be sometime in the not too distant future, but I can't speak for them. But that also might be an opportunity to incorporate some kind of questions that have to do with wellness. So, and I'm unsure. UNA has actually collaborated with some UBC students on a whole bunch of living lab projects. So it's not at all beyond the realm of the possible, I would think. Anyone else want to kind of speak to those various possibilities?
I would just echo what you said about, I mean, we do move a number of projects forward using the capabilities and capacity of the academic campus to do that. Wegland's done quite a bit of work using a relationship with the forestry department and moving forward in data collection on our trees and that kind of work. So along the same lines, if there was a project that came through the CIAC committee or potentially even maybe through a different, if land use had adjusted terms of reference or whatever the case may be, and that came to the board, we could then look at a way to create or support a project where we take advantage of that for sure.
It's a quick one. I didn't need much on that.
Great. So thank you, Michael. So that brings us to the end of. Oh, sorry. Yes.
I have two points I'd like to bring up under new business. We've alluded to this earlier, but I'd like to make it official that to give notice of motion that the board consider the matter outlined in my email to directors dated November 16th with the subject line reading, the Neighbors Fund fiscal year ended March 31st, 2005, regarding UNA participation during the annual audit of the Neighbors Fund. I'd like that placed in the agenda for the next regular board meeting.
In the agenda for the next regular board meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and second, a request that somebody from the UNA staff, and probably Paul, you're the best one for this, reach out to the appropriate staff within UBC to inquire about and prepare just a short report for the next board meeting outlining whether the UNA is permitted to participate in the audit review of the Neighbors Fund, and if not, reasons why this would not be permitted.
I'm going to ask advice in front of the procedural level, and then we'll decide how to.
I think it's correct. I think it's accurate.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not accurate. I just want to make sure that, like, do we need a formal motion? Could just a request to refer? Like, I just want to make sure that I do this correctly. Jake, so first of all, your requests are noted, and I would suggest that just as we always have a call for board members to add things to the agenda. Could you rather than wait for that call, simply send that request to Lauren and Paul to put those items on the agenda for the next meeting? You've done that right now here, but just to make sure that the wording and kind of that they can work with you to make sure that it gets on the agenda in the way that you intend.
That's right.
So, okay.
Yep.
All right, great. Thanks. Okay, is there anything else before
We adjourn. Okay, so I will move that the board adjourn into a closed session to discuss matters relating to discussions and dealings with other entities or individuals where disclosure of the information being discussed could be harmful to the UNA's interests, employee relations and other human resources matters, and the approval of minutes for a closed session or restricted closed session of a board meeting. Seconder Michael, and all in favor? Motion carries. So we will take a